Mexico gave us the fight the world has been waiting for: Hamilton versus Verstappen, round infinity. It was fierce, it was messy, and it ended with a 10-second penalty that changed everything. But behind the cameras, telemetry and politics tell a story no one showed you. What Lewis said, what Ferrari found, and what the stewards missed. This was Formula One at its rawest. As the lights went out, the track erupted. Hamilton launched perfectly, a clean, controlled start that reminded everyone why precision is still his greatest weapon. Behind him, chaos brewed, Norris defending, Verstappen attacking, Leclerc guarding the inside. In the middle of that chaos, Hamilton was poetry in motion. Smooth throttle, measured steering, eyes already scanning the apex of turn 1 before the pack even reached it. Through the first few corners, he looked untouchable. Calm in a storm, a champion in control. For the first 5 laps, Ferrari's dream was alive, Hamilton running third, matching the leaders, the red car gliding like it belonged there. Then came lap 6. Verstappen, the one name that changes the tone of every Hamilton race since 2021. The Dutchman had clawed his way forward, the Red Bull DRS slicing through the Mexican air. Into turn 1, he lunged late, brutal, uncompromising. Hamilton on the outside gave space, reading the danger as only he can. But the grip was gone. Dust kicked up. The 2 cars brushed wheels, just enough to send Hamilton onto the grass. For a second, the Ferrari was airborne, a streak of red and white fighting physics. But in true Hamilton fashion, he caught it. No panic, no spin, just control, pure control. He rejoined the track ahead of Verstappen, keeping the car steady as the Red Bull slipped behind him. From the cockpit, the radio crackled, no celebration, no complaint, just breathing. It was classic Lewis, focus first, emotion later. But while the crowd cheered the duel, the stewards were already reviewing it. What they saw on the replay would soon turn a racing moment into controversy. From the very first lap of the Mexican Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton was in command. The Ferrari SF25, a car that had often frustrated him earlier in the season, suddenly felt alive beneath his hands. The opening phase of the race was a masterpiece in rhythm and control, Hamilton holding position in third, reading the race like a chess player, mapping out the next 20 moves. He knew Mexico was a race of patience. The high altitude meant the engine suffered, tires overheated, and overtaking was costly. Everything about his driving was deliberate. Smooth throttle application, early gear shifts, precision braking. He wasn't chasing chaos. He was managing inevitability. Then, on lap 6, the inevitable arrived disguised as Max Verstappen. The Red Bull had been closing fast, its DRS slicing through the thin air with brutal efficiency. Verstappen went for it, a deep, late lunge into turn 1. It was a move that was equal parts talent and arrogance. Hamilton saw it coming, left space, but had nowhere to go when Verstappen overcommit. The front right wheels brushed, a moment of contact that sent the Ferrari skipping over the grass. Hamilton's reaction saved it, pure instinct, pure muscle memory. He rejoined the track safely, still ahead. No damage, no chaos, just a racer doing what racers do, surviving. The crowd roared. To them, it was wheel-to-wheel magic. To the stewards, it was controversy waiting to happen. Minutes later, the message flashed across the screens. Car 44 under investigation for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. Ferrari's pit wall went cold. Inside the cockpit, Hamilton stayed silent. He knew how these things go. Since 2021, he's learned that sometimes Formula One doesn't judge just by rules, it judges by perception. When the penalty came through 10 seconds, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like deja vu. That's bullshit, man. There was no grip there, he said on the radio, frustration cutting through his usually composed tone. He wasn't shouting, wasn't arguing, just stating the obvious truth of a racer's perspective. He hadn't chosen to leave the track. He'd been forced there. Ferrari's engineers immediately went to work. They checked sector data, tire temperatures, deltas, anything that could show whether Hamilton had actually gained time. The numbers were clear. He hadn't. His rejoined speed was lower than Verstappen's sector split. In other words, there was no competitive advantage. But data doesn't always win arguments in Formula One. The decision stood. 10 seconds to serve at the pit stop. For any other driver, that might have been a breaking point. But Hamilton has built a career out of turning setbacks into performances. All right, he said quietly. We'll make it back. In that moment, the race stopped being about winning. It became about proving a point not to the stewards, but to himself and to Ferrari. What came next was vintage Hamilton. He didn't overdrive, didn't let the injustice consume him. Instead, he sank into a deeper level of focus. His telemetry from lap 7 to 20 showed a level of consistency that bordered on mechanical perfection. He wasn't just driving fast, he was sculpting every corner, balancing the car through subtle changes in brake bias and energy deployment. While Verstappen fought the car behind him, Hamilton was playing the long game, saving tires, managing the engine, and keeping his mind calm. Even his tone on the radio shifted. No frustration, no emotion, just precision. When his engineer, Riccardo Adami, gave him the delta gap to the cars ahead, Hamilton responded simply, copy. 2 syllables. Controlled, focused, dangerous. By lap 25, it was clear to everyone watching that the penalty hadn't broken him, it had sharpened him. Ferrari strategists recalculated the race. Without the 10-second loss, Hamilton would have been back in podium contention. But for Lewis, it was never about the mathematics. It was about integrity. When he finally pitted to serve his penalty, he hit every mark, not a millimeter over the line, not a second wasted. He came back out 14th and immediately started carving through the field. One by one, he passed cars with surgical precision. No drama, no radio complaints. Just relentless execution. The penalty may have taken 10 seconds off his race time, but it added another chapter to the legend of a driver who refuses to let the sport define him. Once the penalty was confirmed, Hamilton knew that anger wouldn't save the race, intelligence would. The Ferrari SF25 was not the fastest car on the grid, but was predictable, responsive, and precise in his hands. What followed was a lesson in control under constraint. Most drivers, after a penalty like that, push harder, overheat the tires, and lose the balance. Hamilton did the opposite. He slowed the rhythm of his breathing, recalibrated his inputs, and began managing the car like an engineer rather than a gladiator. His telemetry during those next 15 laps revealed what Ferrari's analysts later called stability under chaos. Steering trace smoothness, throttle modulation, and brake consistency, all within 1% of ideal variation. It was control at a level that computers can measure, but humans can rarely match. The penalty forced Ferrari to abandon their initial 2-stop strategy. The plan had been to pit around lap 25, switch to hard tires, and challenge for the podium through undercuts. But serving 10 seconds stationary changed the calculus completely. Instead of frustration, Hamilton immediately adapted the race logic himself. Let's extend this stint, get the data, and see what the tires give us, he told the team. It wasn't defeat, it was data gathering live during a race. That single line of communication told Ferrari everything about who they had signed. This wasn't just a driver executing instructions, this was a racer orchestrating development in real time. As the race unfolded, the true depth of Hamilton's technical ability became obvious. While Verstappen and Norris complained of overheating tires and unstable rear grip, Hamilton was quietly maintaining his lap times. His tire degradation curve was among the flattest of the field, a mere 0.03 seconds per lap, thanks to how he modulated braking entry and rotation. He used lift and coast techniques at corners where others braked late, keeping the car's energy distribution stable and fuel efficient. Engineers monitoring his telemetry described it as symphonic driving. Each input throttle, brake, steering complemented the next in perfect rhythm. The SF25 might not have been dominant, but under Hamilton's hands, it was harmonious. Inside the Ferrari garage, a shift was happening. The young engineers who had joined in the post-Leclerc era had never worked with a driver like Hamilton before. They were used to raw feedback, understeer here, snap oversteer there. But Lewis gave them something richer, diagnosis. His radio messages weren't complaints, they were microscopic observations. Rear diff losing consistency on exit at 200 kilometers per hour, he said on lap 41. Moments later, the engineers confirmed a minor temperature rise in the differential sensors. It wasn't guesswork, it was intuition verified by science. That's why Fred Vasseur later said, Lewis doesn't just drive the car, he audits it. For Ferrari, that was revolutionary. As Hamilton climbed back through the field 14th to 12th, 12th to 10th, something remarkable happened. Despite the earlier grass excursion, which had damaged a section of the floor and cost him 0.2 per lap, he began setting purple sectors in the second half of the race. The SF25, once considered fragile in dirty air, was now stable. That was no coincidence. His driving technique managing tire temperature and keeping consistent brake bias in the thin Mexican atmosphere was compensating for the car's flaws. He's basically recalibrating the car from inside, said one engineer over the team radio. By the final stint, his lap times were comparable to Leclerc's, despite running on older tires. That's what Ferrari hadn't had since Alonso, a driver who makes the car better the longer he drives it. After the race, the engineering debrief lasted over an hour. Hamilton sat with his race engineer, Riccardo Adami, and Vasseur reviewing telemetry, sector by sector. He didn't dwell on the penalty, he dissected performance. He noted that the SF-25's hybrid deployment map was too aggressive for the thin Mexican air, that the brake ducts needed a smaller cooling aperture, and that the ride height could be lowered by 3 millimeters in future high-altitude races. Every suggestion was based not on data sheets, but on feel. You don't need to tell him what the car does, one Ferrari analyst said afterward. He tells you. That's the level Ferrari has been chasing for a decade, not just a driver fast enough to win, but smart enough to rebuild.